Before you continue watching this video, I just want to warn you guys, this is not going to be a fun video. This is one of those videos that you need to know if you want to get into 3D, but unfortunately it is a little bit of a technical topic. And of course I'm talking about rigging. Today I want to rig this guy. I think the result from our live stream and our class here was really cool, and I feel like I could just add a little bit of movement and get a couple of extra renders for this guy right here. So we're going to go over bones, we're going to go over skinning, we're going to go over controllers, and at the end we're also going to be doing a little bit of animation. I have a big suspicion that this is going to be one of those videos that not a lot of people are going to watch, and it might have very few views, but I don't care. If you're watching this, you're awesome because you are learning the things that you need to know to become an amazing 3D artist, and I'm going to be sharing them with you. So let's go. Now, the first thing that you're going to see on this character is that we have an asymmetrical sort of construction, right? Normally, when you're rigging a character, you're going to have asymmetrical element. Of course, there's also the watermark because I did not update my 3D code license. I am just using the learning license, which gives us this watermark version. But yeah, let's go to the side view right here, and let's start adding the first bones for our character. Now, I don't want to make this overly complex. I just want to add a chest bone, a neck bone, a head bone, a couple of bones for the eyes so that we can add just a little bit of movement if we need to. And after that, we're of course going to be doing the tentacles. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to go to rigging. I'm going to start with this bone right here. I'm going to create a bone right there. That's going to be my rig bone. I'm going to go to show. Let me just make sure that I have my isolating or something. Why am I not seeing that? Oh, it's right there. It's just very small. Okay, so that's fine. It's right there. It's very, very small, but it's right there, my joint. The second one's going to be here on the neck. The next one's going to be on the base of the head. And that's pretty much it. Those are the main, like the first three bones that I'm going to be adding. Now, bones have a very interesting particularity, and that is the fact that they have something called a local rotation axis. Technically, every shape inside of Maya and inside of all the 3D softwares have something called local rotation axis, but for the bones, it's really, really, really important because it tells us how these things are like pointing, right? Usually, you want your bone to be pointing to the next bone. That's, again, the usual way to do it. But you're going to see that the tip of the bones, or the tip bone right here, in this case, the head bone, is actually aligned to our 3D grid. So Y is up, X is left and right, and C is front. That's fine. We're going to leave it just like this. However, I don't like the orientation that we have here on the Y-axis. And why is this? Because if we were to rotate this on the Y-axis, it's not the same Y-axis for this one that is going to be for this one over here. So ideally, we want to do, a little bit of rotation. And here's where, again, things get a little bit technical, because if you want to have like a really, really nice orientation for your joints, you need to understand how to use constraint and orients to point things towards each other. I know at this point in the video, like half of you are gone. So half of the audience is now gone. Now we're stuck with the people that really, really want to learn these things. Let's go. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab this bone, Shift P. I'm going to do a Shift P right here to just break it down. And pretty much what I want to do is I want to keep the exact same orientation for this bone, but I want to make sure that the Y is pointing forward. Why? Because it's just going to look nicer from a controller perspective, okay? Now, I'm also going to grab this joint right here and Shift P to separate it. Now, this one, I'm going to press E and click to go into object rotation mode, and I'm going to rotate this 180 degrees. Okay, so it's going to be 180 degrees, and as you can see now, the Y is pointing forward, the Z is pointing to the right, which is what we want, and everything is ready to go. So I'm going to grab this first bone right here. Let's get rid of geometry. There we go. So I'm going to grab this bone right here, this one, and hit P, and then grab this one and hit P again. And as you can see, the link or the chain gets reconstructed, which again is going to give us a very nice effect. Now, you might be wondering, why do we not change the orientation of the head, right? Because it's on the tip of the element. Why do we want to keep it exactly like that? And the reason is pretty much because the head is one of those things that you move a lot. So if it's oriented to the world, it's a little bit easier to manage. However, there is an advanced way in which you can have multiple rotations for your head. It's called like a headlock. So you can have the head be rotated along with the chest, or you can have the chest rotating along the other thing, and it kind of becomes like a chicken head where it's always pointing forward. I'm probably going to be doing an update on my rigging course soon. Not soon, probably like halfway through next year, because I definitely need to polish and bring up some new tools for you guys. But that's one of the things that I cover on my rigging classes normally. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Now, the next thing that's very important is the names. This one is going to be called chest. This one's going to be called a neck. And the last one is going to be called head. Now, you might be wondering, can we have multiple neck joints, right? Like, could we have several neck joints if we want to have a bend on the neck? And the answer is yes. Now, however, since I want to keep the whole like exercise simple, I'm just going to have one single neck joint. Now, once we have this, I'm going to go to the right view right here, and I'm going to go to my bones. And I'm going to create a one joint. There we go. By default, when you create a joint, its local rotation axis is always going to be pointing in the exact same direction as your world. Now, if you create multiple joints, that's where the rotations start changing. So if I create like a joint chain right here, and I show you their local rotation axis, you're going to see that they get all changed. Even the first one gets changed because it's pointing to the next joint. So that's just something important to keep in mind. Now, for this one, we also want to keep it very like normal. I'm going to have this one. It's going to be like a eyebrow like mover. So this one's going to move the eyebrow, this part of the eyebrow up. And then I'm going to add one, actually, because usually the zygomatic bone, like this bone right here, it doesn't move as much. So instead of what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 3 joints because this guy has like a very big eyebrow. So I'm going to grab like a couple of joints right here just to move like the upper area. We can also push it down, of course. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Now this one is going to be called left underscore. I'm going to say actually actually let's call this left underscore center, or just Z for center, and then eyebrow. And then this one's going to be left meath eyebrow because it's closer to the middle. And this one's going to be called L. Let's call it E, like an edge, right? So it's the edge eyebrow. There we go. Now, the big question is, where are all of these guys going to be attached to? And the answer is, should be fairly easy to understand here. All of this are going to be attached to the head joint right there. Some people might add a tip joint for the head. I don't like adding it because in game engines, usually the tip joint is not taking into account. It's just there for visualization purposes. But if you want to add another one, it's rather simple. We can just like literally go to the side view right here, go into my joint elements right here, just add one there on the tip. Let's call this head tip. Let's move it. Okay, it's right where it's supposed to be, and just parent it right there. Again, it's just for like, normally that one is just for like visualization things or options. Remember, I'm using this option right here, which is called the X-ray joints, which allows me to see the joints on the other side or through the geometry. And that's pretty much it. This guy doesn't have a mouth. It just has this like weird tentacles, right? So the only thing I need to do is I need to create the tentacle chain that's going to be going along the elements. And this is a really actually good exercise for you guys because as we've mentioned previously, the elements are a little bit like asymmetrical. So this front tentacle right here is asymmetrical and this tip tentacles are not asymmetrical. So let's start with the like side tentacles. I'm going to go with my bone tool and I'm literally just going to start clicking on the bones. The more elements I add, the nicer the curvature or the bend of the bone can be. However, in this particular case, since it's a very sort of like low poly character, it really doesn't matter that much. What you do want to try is to align some of these guys to the edges of your object. So for instance, you can see right there, I'm actually going to go back. I'm going to go right there, and then the next one's going to be there, there, there. Let's go there. Let's do another one right there. And then the little tip at the end. There we go. So that's going to give me, a little bit of a smoother effect. There are ways to rig as well, like using tails and curves to make this like super, super soft. In this case, we're going to go with a traditional forward kinematic system, which is going to be doing our rigging from the front all the way, or from the back all the way to the front. So there we go. Now for this one, we're going to keep this very simple. I'm just going to grab all of the joints, go up here to my rename tool, which should be over here. And I'm going to call this L, capital L underscore tentacle underscore, or just actually just like that. So it's going to be tentacle. It's going to be tentacle 0. It's the base, of course. And then we're going to go all the way to tentacle 7. Now, again, if we take a look at the local rotation axis, you're going to see that all of them are pretty much pointing exactly where I want them to, except maybe for the first joint, as you can see right there. So I'm going to grab this first joint. I'm going to move it to the side. And this is where things start getting a little bit tricky because yes, we did match the tentacle on the side view, but not on the front view. So now I need to go to the front view. There we go. And I need to start rotating. Here's where the first rule of joint orientation comes into play. You never, ever want to move the joint. You're only going to be rotating, because if you move the joints, what's going to happen is the local rotation axis that we're talking about, it breaks. It no longer points to the next joint. So a very common issue is that people will just like move the joints, and look at that X right there. It just got broken. So ideally, you don't want to like move them. You can later on like get them back to the same position that they were. But to be honest, again, from a simple way to do it, it's just way easier to just move them by yourself like this. So that's good. Again, if we really want to put or make sure that this Y1 points to the front, we can just Shift P this one, grab this one right here, rotate this 180 degrees on this side right here. There we go. And then just reparent this together. Now, here's another very cool secret. And by this point, I know we lost the other half of the people that were watching the video. So again, if you're here, thank you very much, because you're learning things that are very, very tricky to understand. But if you grasp these concepts, I guarantee that you're going to become a better artist. So the little secret here that happens is that all of this information on the rotation needs to disappear. Otherwise, when we add the controllers, it's going to be a little bit difficult to make sure that they're working the way we want them to work. So what we're going to do here is I'm literally going to grab all of the tentacles and just freeze transformation. And the fun thing, this is why joints are so important. Joints can save or keep their local rotation while still having their rotation value set to 0. How does this happen? You might ask. Well, thanks to you being here and learning about this, you're going to see that all of the joints right here on its attribute editor, they have something called the joint orient. So they save that information on the joint orient of the element. So now every single joint, as you can see right here, has 0 transforms or their rotations, but they will have some values on their joint orient. It's kind of like a hidden value that they use to remember their position while still maintaining this rotation set to 0. A single object or a geometry object does not have that property. That's why, again, these guys are so important. Now, this one, of course, is also going to be parented to this point right here. There we go. And now, once we have this guy right here, I'm going to go to the rigging tab. I'm going to go to skeleton, and we're going to mirror joints to look for the L and get the R and just hit mirror. There we go. So now we have both tentacles like properly mirrored. And once we go into skinning, they should be moving very, very nicely. Now, we can already do the same thing for all of these joints right here. The face joints in this case. This is a very, very basic face rigging system, by the way. There are way more complex ways to do it. So I'm going to do skeleton and mirror joints as well. Oh, actually, we need to do it one by one, because it looks for each like individual chain. So 1, 2, and 3. There we go. As you can see, those are going to allow me to move the eyes a little bit on my character. Which again, in a game system or in a game like a character like this one, where you usually don't have as much resources and you want to be as efficient as possible, this one works perfectly fine. Now we're going to go for the center tentacle. So again, I'm going to go to rigging. I'm going to go to my like rotation or creation tool. I'm going to start right there. I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There we go. And then we're going to go to the front view. Again, let's grab all of this guys right here. Local rotation axis. I always like to see my local rotation axis just because it's a little bit easier. You can see that it's very, very, like, it remains quite, like, normal up to a point to, like, right around there. So we're going to go right there, there. Try to always keep your joints as close as possible to the center of mass of your character. It doesn't have to always be that way. Sometimes you might have some of the joints like kind of like pushing out or in of the element. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Cool. Now you can see that again, the local rotation axis of this first 2 bones are actually not pointing to the back in this case, or all of the other ones are not pointing to where they're supposed to be. I'm going to keep it like this just to show you how it could affect later on. It might not even affect too much, to be honest, but one way you can very quickly test this out is if I grab all of these elements right here and I try to, except for the last one, and I try to rotate in C, it should try to do like a normal, like smooth transition. And as you can see here, that's not really giving us the best one. And that's because, again, the C-axis, they're not all pointing to the same direction. So ideally, we want them to point everywhere. So I'm going to grab all of the guys right here, Shift P, and only the ones that are like to the other side, like this guy. Wait, let me take a look at where the other tentacles are pointing. So as you can see, this tentacle right here, which is the one that we were seeing as reference, it's pointing Y to the positive axis, to the positive Z axis. So this guy and this guy, we're going to rotate 180 on this guy right here. There we go. So now all of them share the same plane. This is what we call sharing the same plane. Now, of course, here, the process is a little bit time consuming, but we need to start from the bottom up and start like joining all of these elements right here. This one, P, this one, P, this one, P. Oh, yep, there we go, P, and then this one, and P. There we go. So now all of them are parented. And now I want you guys to look at this. Let's, of course, grab everything first and do a freeze transform. But all of the rotations are nice. And now if I grab, again, everything except for the first one and we're rotating C, you're going to see that the rotation is way, way smoother. Why? Because they share the same plane. They're all facing in the same direction. They all have the same orientation. And this is one of those things that people don't tell you about when they're rigging. They just start adding joints everywhere, and then you don't know why they need to be in a specific way. You rig your character, and then when you add controllers, things are just moving everywhere. So again, thanks to the 20 or 50 guys that are watching this at this point, because you guys are learning the secret of why bone rotation is so important. Now this one, of course, it just gets like normal parented to the back right here. We definitely need to rename it. So I'm going to rename this Z as in center underscore F for front and just tentacle. It's going to be again 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there you go. You can see our little like a rig right here is becoming more and more complex. Of course, we got a lot of joints for all of the tentacles, but this is the way rigging works. There's really no other secret to it. We just add all of these elements and make sure that they are moving and rotating in the right direction. Now we need to go, of course, to the final tentacle, which is the back one right here. Now, technically, the final tentacle is pretty much the same as the front tentacle. So one of the things that we can do is we can literally just duplicate this element. It's going to save us a little bit of time because we're not going to have to start from scratch, right? We're going to start right here with the tentacle. Again, remember, we do not move the joints. We just rotate them. This is a simple way. I don't want to, because later people are, I don't hate this. I understand how this works, but people then quote me as like, oh, Abraham said this. It has to be that way. No. There's multiple ways to do things, okay? I recommend, especially when you're just starting rigging or learning about rigging, to try to keep things as controlled as possible because it's a very technical process. So that's why even though you could move the joints and then retarget them or reorient them properly, I just find it a little bit easier to explain and to show you guys to do this without moving the joints, okay? So just rotating the joints. That way, when we freeze transformation on all of the joints, which by the way, we can go to the first joint right here and just freeze transformation is going to propagate to every single joint. As you can see, every single joint now has its rotation set to 0. We're going to be good to go. So this is it. This is the process for rigging. Okay. Now, again, rigging has 3 main areas, which is rigging, the like positioning or placement of joints. Then we got skinning, which is what we're about to jump into. And finally, we got controllers. Sometimes people do controllers before they do skinning. It depends on the pipeline, on the studio. In this case, we're going to go over here. The only thing I want to change though is I want to go to all of this CF tentacles and I'm going to call them ZB tentacles because they're the back tentacles. The name of the joint is not really, I mean, it is important. Nah, who am I kidding? It is important. It's always good to keep things clean. I was going to say that it was not as important because you don't see it, right? It's not something that you see on the controller. It's all in the rigs. But especially when you bring this into Unreal or another engine or something, if you have multiple things that are named the same or you have a lot of names that are not easy to understand, it can become a little bit tricky. So let's grab everything here again. And I'm just going to go back to my rigging tab. By the way, this local rotation axis, I didn't mention where to get this. This is on the display, transform display, local rotation axis. So there we go. Now we grab this one right here, we select and we hide. Perfect. Now we need to do the skinning and the skinning goes like this. To do the skinning, we are going to select all of the joints that we want to be affected by the skin. In this case, it's going to be every single joint except for the last one. That's why I was mentioning that tips don't really matter. So in this case, the head tip, it doesn't really matter. The tentacle tip doesn't really matter. The tentacles don't matter. Of course, the eyes right here, I know they're tips, but they do matter because we do want to have some weight to them. Same as the chest bone right here. So you're going to select everything right there. You're going to select your mesh right here. Of course, we need to reselect mesh. There we go. And you're going to go to skin, bind skin. There's multiple ways to bind them. I usually just go joint hierarchy, closest distance, classic linear. Max influence, I personally like to use only 3. If you use more max influences, you're going to have smoother like effects, but it also becomes a little bit more complicated to control. I do like to set this to colorize the skeleton. Again, very important, bind to, selected joints only. This is the important part. So select the joints, closest distance. You can try geodesic voxel. In this case, it's not really going to work as much. Actually, it might work nicely. Geodesic voxel voxelizes your character and attaches certain boxes to each joint. And that, again, especially for this tentacles, it might work a little bit better, to be honest. So I'm just going to see apply. Wait for this to do its process, and there we go. We got this very nice colorful skeleton, and if you grab one of these points and you move it, you should be able to get a nice distribution of the character. Look at that. Yeah, so in this case, geodesic voxel actually works very nice thanks to the voxelization. So as you can see, there's no contamination of the weights from one point to the other. And look at this. For instance, we can grab this joint right here, and if we move it, we can move this part of the character. If we move this one right here, we can move the whole thing. And that's going to give us a very, very nice animation. If we grab the neck and we rotate, You can see how the chest stays pretty much the same. And again, this is how animation works. Now, of course, in order to make this thing a little bit nicer, we need to think about how this skin is affecting every single element. And there's a whole bunch of literature about how to do like skinning properly. In this case, I'm just going to keep it very, very simple. If I rotate this head, you can see that the rotation on the neck looks quite nice, but the rotation on the neck right here, I think it's a little bit too aggressive. As you can see, it's moving a lot of the chest. So that means that the chest bone, this one right here, doesn't have as much value, right? Like the way this works is each joint gets assigned a specific value to each vertex. So imagine you're a vertex, right? And there's two joints, one at the side. This one's going to be right joint and this one's going to be left joint. If you are 50-50 and left joint tells you, or right joint tells you move this side, you're only going to move halfway on the distance, right? Because you're also obeying this left joint that's telling you to stay put. So if this joint has 80% weight on you and it says move to this side, you're going to move more to this side and be left a little bit less space on this one side, right? So again, hopefully that's a little bit clear, but that's the way joints work. Every single vertex on your mesh will have a specific value assigned to different bones along your rig. And depending on how high that value is, the movement of the joint is going to be slightly different. So for instance, if we go to the tip right here, let's go. Oh, actually, you can see that these ones are not. What happened there? They messed up. Let me go back a little bit. It seems like I messed up there a little bit. Let me fix this real quick. There we go. So now the skin cluster is a lot closer, as I was mentioning, and as you can see, that's why it moved. But this is very, very common. Look at this. We got the tip right here, and even though we want all of the weight to be attached to the tip, it's actually not doing exactly what we want. And this is where paint skin weights comes into play. The way this works is very simple. You select the element, you go to skin, and you go to paint skin weights, and you're going to get a little table over here on the tool that tells you what joint you're currently working on and how much that joint is affecting the geometry that's close to it. So for instance, if we're in the chest joint, you can see that the red, which is the highest influence, value of 1, is only on the bottom part. And I would like it to be a little bit higher. So I'm going to make this brush a little bit bigger. I'm going to go here to the stroke, make this thing a little bit bigger, a little bit more. And as you can see, I'm going to go here to, not to the replace, I'm going to go to the add option. And I'm going to add a value of 0.2. Okay, so now what I can do is I can add more value to this vertex. And what that's going to do is now this vertex are going to obey the bottom part of the chest a little bit better. Now, I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. The painting, like the default painting tools that we have here inside of Maya, they're not that good. They're very similar to what we normally get in things like Blender, but there are better tools out there. There's a couple of plugins that are really, really good. If you want me to talk about them, let me know in the comments. Let's go here to smooth real quick. And as you can see, this is going to allow me to smooth things out. And what's going to happen now is if I move the neck, the rest of the chest is not going to move as much. So it's going to give me a way, way more realistic deformation on the back part right here. So it's still going to be a little bit of a stretchiness, which is nice, but it's not going to be as much. A very common technique that animators use is as follows. You're going to select your joint. You're going to add a keystroke or a keyframe, sorry, at one place. And then on another element, like let's say frame 20, you're going to go to one element. Let's go frame 10. I'm going to go to another one right here. So I can scrub and see how the deformation is going. So for instance, I can see here that the deformation is way, way, way too much right there. So that means that I need to go to the paint skin weight tool and just like smooth things out a little bit more. That's going to give me, again, a nicer transition on that area. It's not going to lose a lot of volume. So there we go. Now that looks way, way better for my character. And the same thing is going to happen with every single bone. This is where painting skins is something that people don't like to do as much, because you literally have to go, let's go for instance to the right tentacle. In this case, I'm going to go to the left tentacle right here, to the tip of the tentacle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add over here, and I'm going to add more points or more value right there. I'm going to go to this one, and I want to add a little bit more value over on that side. And we'll go to this one, and we add a little bit more value. We don't want to add full value, because if we add full value, what's going to happen is things are going to look a little bit too jaggedy. So we want to always have a little bit of a gradient. We can smooth later on as well. But it is important to add, for instance, see how this joint has pretty much no values right there, because it's very close to the head. So we definitely want to like paint it a little bit more right there. Go to tentacle 1, which as you can see, it's this one right here as well. So we're going to add a little bit of value right there. And then tentacle 0, which is close to the face. That one's actually quite nice. So now if we grab this one right here and we move it, you can see that's moving nicely. And the real test right here is to go to the tentacles, grab all of the tentacles, and then try to rotate them the way we did, except for the tip, of course, the way we did before. And if they rotate nicely, then that's what we're looking for. So as long as they rotate, there we go. I know that's like very exaggerated, but you can see how it deforms nicely, right? So it can like do this very interesting effect. If you start seeing a little bit too much jaggedness or something, you're probably gonna have to fix that as well. So yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. That's how you do skinning. Of course, again, the more time you spend on this thing, the nicer the skin is gonna be. But this one's already looking quite nice. So the last part that we need to do is going to be controllers, but the video is running a little bit low. So I was not intending this to be a two-part, but I know this might be a little bit too much information. In case you want to follow along, remember this file is available in our Gumroad. You can go and check it out, download it for free. You can do, of course, the hand-painted exercise with 3D code. But if you just want to do the rigging process, it's going to be there. The textures, like this color textures, are not there, unfortunately. Well, not unfortunately, we didn't add them, to be honest. But if you want to, again, if you just want to have them, just send me a message in Discord, and I think I can get them to you. So that's pretty much it, my friends. Thanks for sticking on to this point, and please let me know if you want to see part 2 where we add controllers. Technically, at this point, once you have the bones and the joints, you can already start doing the proper animation. You can animate directly on the bones. It's not ideal, but it can be done. So I'm gonna stop it right here, guys. I'll see you back on the next one. Bye bye.